Take notice, this public meeting of the Saraville Board of Education was emailed to the Star Ledger and the Home News Tribune in accordance with Chapter 231, Public Law 1975. Further, in accordance with NJSA 10:4-6 to 10:4-21, a copy of this notice is posted outside the Secretary's office and also filed with the Clerk of the Borough of Saraville. Please rise for the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. DeAndrea, roll call, please.
Mr. Balka.
Here.
Mrs. Backo.
Here.
Mrs. Bloom.
Here.
Mr. Brzezinski.
Here.
Mrs. DePinto.
Here.
Mr. McEnone.
Present.
Mrs. Trapp. Mr. Walsh.
Here.
And Mr. Syak.
Here. Mrs. Trapp is on a vacation, which was planned many months in advance, so she will not be with us. She'll be back for our next meeting. Mr. DeAndrea, would you please go through the executive session matters that we discussed?
This evening in executive session, 2 items were discussed. Personnel included but not limited to agenda items, and under attorney-client privilege, various legal issues associated with the Saraville War Memorial High School football program and student discipline.
Thank you. We'll move on now to our presentation, which is the proposed 2015-16 Buildings and Grounds budget. Mr. DeAndrea, I think that's you.
Once again, good evening to the board members and to the public. On behalf of Sherry Komprowski, she had an unfortunate close friend pass away, and the wake and the services were this evening, so she could not attend. So this evening, Mr. Pantoliano and I will present your budgetary consideration for the facilities department. I will work with Dennis to bring the board through this presentation. Let's see if I get this right. All right. The budget is dedicating to reducing costs wherever we can and still maintain our high standards of a clean building and things of that nature, and in conjunction with working with our counterparts down at the borough to do everything together to share services between our department and theirs. And on those things, I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Pantoliano because he has the most interaction with the borough in regards to those types of shared services.
Thank you, Mr. DeAndrea. Just to touch base on what we're actually doing with the town, we're collectively working together. Just recently at Arlett School, we had a couple of dozen trees planted, and we had to water these trees. We didn't have the facilities to do that, but the town did. They had a truck with a tanker on it, and we watered these trees. If we didn't have this truck, we would have to water this with buckets, hoses, yada, yada, yada. But besides that, they help us with snow removal, cleaning our parking lots. I mean, I can go on and on and on as far as how helpful they are. They've been to us, to the district, since I've been on board here. That's all I got to say.
And in turn, there are items that we also do help them with. So there are times they turn to us for certain equipment we have, and we work with them in that regard. As Mr. Pantoliano, snow removal. If you ever notice during our graduation ceremonies, our parking lots are always clean. They come over and they do clean the parking lots. They use their sweeper and things of that nature. And those are some of the things that we work together with them to move forward with those types of items. Information about the district. Obviously, we're 7 school buildings, 1 administrative office, a little over 900,000 square feet between all the buildings, 50 custodians that basically work 3 separate shifts. We have a 7 to 3 shift, 11 to 7, and then also a 3 to 11. There are 2 other shifts in the contract that we do not use, but they are basically there. They're staggered to ensure that we have proper coverage all day long during the building while students are in there. We also have 8 maintenance staff. Several years ago, 2 of those 8 maintenance staff members actually work the 3 to 11 shift so we can accomplish additional tasks so we're not interrupting the students during the day of things that have to go on in the classroom. We have 3 grounds people and 2 stockroom members, one who actually oversees all the receiving of all materials, supplies that come into this district. And if you were ever to be down by the warehouse or the stockroom on some nice, wonderful August day when 42 pallets roll off of 3 or 4 18-wheeler trucks, it's all going to one person, and he is actually checking in every order, breaking down those orders, and distributing them to the full district. It's a little bit about the district. Going to get into line-by-line budget comparisons. This is a new process, a learning process for all of us. So going to walk through it, quite different than what we've done in the past. I'll do my best to get people through it. Building contracted services, those are services that we actually bring in outside contractors. They're not above the big bid threshold. They're generally within the bid threshold or somewhere around that. And they require a whole host of various projects. There is no one single project in there. When the board does receive the breakout, there's about 20 different items in that budget line item to get to the $507,000.
Mr. DeAndrea, as you go through, can you just highlight if there's any like 6-digit increases or 6-digit decreases, if there's any major drivers that you can speak
Well,
about?
and that's
this
what
time?
in the 188, there is no one driving factor. It's a combination of various different things that we're looking to do.
So it'll be an additional budget detail that we get.
Yes, once you get your budget detail, as you've done in the past, you get all of that information detailed to you,
Okay.
once the full budget is presented to the board.
What's the
I-
time frame for that?
Excuse me?
What's the time frame for that?
Right now, we spoke to the Finance Committee, and we're looking to produce that by the end of January. I can tell you 2 items that are in that first line item, going by memory right now, and I can grab it if need be, are the gym floors, refurbishing the high school gym floor, and refurbishing the middle school gym floor. And when we use the word refurbish, it's different than refinishing. Refurbishing basically means we're going to strip all the wax, all the logos, down to the bare wood. Where refinishing, they just come in on a yearly basis and just remove the top layer of wax and put a new layer. And we have those items in there also. And if you wish, I have the list with me if you wanted more information. Building repair services, the difference between that, those repair services are smaller things that are not necessarily bigger projects. Replacing a heating pump, repairing a sewer line, things of that nature that happen on a yearly basis. Of the $185,000, $100,000 is basically a miscellaneous line item for HVAC, electrical, plumbing, and things of that nature that we can't tell you today what may happen 18 months from now of a sewer line that may go or an electrical outlet that may go, things of that nature. Lease payment, this budget that we're currently in, the board approved the purchase of various maintenance equipment. A stockroom truck was purchased under a lease purchase. There is a new plow truck that was purchased. There was some other smaller equipment, $25,000 down payment this year. The first payment next year is $35,000. Maintenance supplies. This is one that Dr. Lavia and I spoke about today. These are just normal, everyday supplies that Dennis's maintenance department needs to keep the district functioning. So is there a way to pinpoint what $180,000 are going to be spent on? No. If we could look at a quick analysis and say so much on this area or by vendor, but what specific items are used, it's a general nature, and I would suggest to anyone that does any work around their home, take any home project. Once you start it, you think you go to the store and you need 3 or 4 items, and then you start the project and you're back at the store because you need another 4 or 5. We're fortunate our planning is a little bit better than that, but those are the type of items that you find in that line item. Miscellaneous are basically clothing allowance, dues and things of that nature in that line item. Purchase services are just a whole host of consultants, and main thing in that line item is our ADHERA, or our asbestos consultant, and the required reports that he's required to file on a yearly basis. Other purchase services, again, are just other services that come along that require some outside consulting work. Police coverage, we have the biggest line item is We're hopeful that we'll continue with the borough to have the 2 SRO officers, one at the middle school and one at the high school. Insurance, again, this part of the insurance is strictly the allocation of insurance for property and vehicles in that nature. And when other budget presentations, you'll see insurance broken out into various areas. Next line is custodial supplies. These are all the supplies and requirements of keeping the buildings clean. The one thing that I would like to report on that is that based on the current reports that we are receiving with the input of the administrators, almost all buildings are rated above a 3 and close to a 5 as far as building cleanliness. Ever since back in roughly around early 2008, we've actually implemented an instrument to go in and evaluate our building cleanliness and the protocols and the procedures that Mrs. Komprowski has put in place, that they know what their requirements are. And I can tell you the one thing that they're conscious of is corners in rooms. Mrs. Komprowski will walk into a room and go right to a corner, and that gives her the first indication if her staff is doing the job that she expects of them. Ground services. These are services that are provided on the outside to keep our grounds maintained in a nice landscape manner. Various types of services that include smaller items that we require. Grounds contracted service, the biggest portion in that line item is the landscaping of all our schools that is done by an outside contractor, and the $151,000 increase, when that point in time comes, it will be an evaluation of a lot of paving requests and things of that nature, depending on the final budget as to if we can support these types of things to go on a yearly basis or postpone them to future years. Ground supplies are just supplies, fertilizers, rock salt, and things like that to keep the grounds in the conditions they are. Capital outlay. First line item is equipment. The past 2 years, there were minimal purchases actually out of budget that were not done through lease purchase. Next year, there are a variety of different items that Mr. Pantaleano and Mrs. Komprowski are requesting. At that point in time, we'll discuss those. Professional services and construction services, at this point in time, there is a 0 proposed budget. And the reason behind that is that in the past, although the figures of 71, 750, and 388 are represented as adjusted budgets, last year the actual budget was 0 because we've been using capital reserve funds to fund those projects that we were doing. And with the uncertainty of what we're going to be moving forward with some type of renovation or brand new building at Salover or some additions to other buildings, at this point in time, those are discussions that the board still has to have before we can determine what we may or may not do under a capital outlay for next year at this point in time. The last one is probably the one that makes the least amount of sense, in that the state of New Jersey on a yearly basis puts out these ROD grants where, as a board, we can apply to the state to get funding through grants, and then after you apply, they approve a grant, they come back and assess you a fee for applying for those grants. And last year, 13-14, we were assessed $300,000 to pay back for the money that they agreed to give us. So it really doesn't make sense, and until we get the actual notice and the bill from them as to how much we owe, that's what we pay. So at this point in time, it's flat, and at some point in time, we'll get that notice to move forward. But it really doesn't make sense that they lent us, or they funded us money through a grant, but now we're required to pay portions of that back on a yearly basis. The last item on the presentation is rock grant applications. We currently have 3, Truman School Roof, Olive School Mechanical, and the district security. Olive School Mechanical was funded through the operating budget or the capital budget in 13-14. The other 2 are being funded through the capital reserve. The reason the word estimated School Development Authority share is there is that when you apply, your application is applied based on an estimated cost. Then you actually bid the project, and once the project is bid, then they fund you based on the actual cost. It still remains as estimated, and I can tell you specifically with the Truman School roof, the board will be seeing a change order to decrease that bid amount to a lower amount, because based on the Truman School roof, there was a contingency built into that of $40,000 that the contractor did not use, so that's a credit back to us. So the contract now is gonna drop by 20-some-odd thousand dollars. So with that drop, the School Development Authority portion also drops. So look at those numbers as truly estimates. They are not, in fact, real numbers until the final applications are filed with the School Development Authority. And that basically brings us through the quick presentation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board?
I have a question.
Sure. Mrs. Backa?
First, I have a specific question, then I have a process question. The police coverage, you said most of it was for SROs.
The two, yes.
All right, since it's consistent across the 3 years, shouldn't I have seen a change because of the lack of police coverage we needed for football games? Where did that, shouldn't that have dropped?
I can tell you that last 13, 14 year, we spent about $121,000 in total.
Right, but this 14, 15 adjusted budget, what was it, it's adjusted, did it start out at 120?
Yes.
It started out at 120,
Yes.
so that number will change?
Currently, yes, it is, and depending on if past history is any indication, we might be over that. We may be over that by the end of the year. But we've had some circumstances that have changed the amount of coverage we needed at athletic events, so we may not see that for this year.
All right, so the 120 is the original budget?
Yes.
Is the original budget. Okay, and you keep mentioning, we'll get to that later, the details, whatever. Are we having another presentation on this? How is this process working? Like, why are we not getting that now?
You like me to explain, Dr.?
How is this working? Since this whole thing changed?
Well, we're giving the presentations now in pieces, but the board is going to get at the end of January a preliminary budget. It's going to be a private document just for the board. So you can see that preliminary budget, and we'll have about a month and a half to take a look at that preliminary budget before we actually submit the technical preliminary budget to the Department of Education. This, I know normally, the board received a preliminary budget at the end of November or December 1st. But because of the fact that we are now a district that we're not required to have a vote on our budget, they pushed back our public hearing about a month. So we wanted to give our principals and our directors more time within the school year to develop a budget rather than having to develop a budget and have us input it by the middle of November, when you've only been in school 2.5 months. To develop a budget when you're just beginning the school year is a very difficult thing. So this has given our principals and our directors until January to get their information into our CSI budget system. We're giving these presentations first, and I think what Mr. DeAndrea spoke about before is the two biggest items on here, that very first item, building contracted services, as well as the grounds contracted services. Those are services based upon information that Mr. Pantaleano and Mr. DeAndrea received from the building principals in terms of work that needs to be done. So they presented that information to you now. It does not mean that at a future date, the Finance Committee can't come back and say, hey, listen, you know, based upon budgetary needs, we may have to prioritize the list of those types of projects that need to be completed. The other thing worth mentioning here is, as you can see, because of those contracted projects, the buildings and grounds budget increased by $365,000. However, if you look at the fact that they've made a decision, a philosophical decision, to go away from the capital outlay projects to more of buildings and grounds projects in-house. And that's going to actually save the district $62,000. Because if you look at capital outlay, it's decreasing by $427,000. So due to this philosophical decision, even with all the projects that the principals are asking to be, be performed, the district still can decrease expenditures by $62,000.
Right, but now, what happens with, are you done looking at capital projects? Is this it?
Not at all.
What we have?
Not at all.
Oh, all right, so, because I know, like, the roof still needs to
Right,
be done here.
and you have to keep in mind that we still have the long-range facility plan that has to be presented by our architect, which I will bring back to the infrastructure committee to look at those things and see if there's anything that comes out glaring in that report that they feel is a health and safety issue that shouldn't be postponed. So there are a lot of other factors that we still have to determine before finalizing this budget.
So there may still be a capital project within this
Absolutely.
budget?
And it may be funded by capital reserve.
But do you know how much money after the 14-15 year we'll have left in capital reserve?
Currently, at the close of the year, we had $1.4 million. And part of that,
No, at the close of this year, I want to know, not last year.
well, if we don't use any 1.4, if we use it, whatever portion we use. So right now, if we don't use it, we'll wind up with the 1.4.
Okay.
And you also have to keep in mind the School Development Authority portion. Those amounts, once received by the School Development Authority, then go also back to capital reserve at that point in time. So there is a potential for more money to go back into capital reserve as these projects are closed out, as the funding comes through, and things of that nature.
But what's the time frame for that, for those, that money to be
We're
settled
about to
on?
close out the roof.
Right.
No, I mean, for this.
I wish I
for the
could tell
portion
you,
come
it-
back. Will it be done by?
I wish I can tell you it's a matter of filing paperwork, contract, because although Dennis indicates the roof is closed out,
Right.
not until the final punch list is prepared, not until all of the proper paperwork is filed and everything else, then I can proceed to the final request for reimbursement. So those processes could take up to 6 months after the process is done.
Right, so is
to
there
file.
can any of those projects be completed with
We're-
that paperwork before this budget is
Paperwork's
voted
already
on?
in process with Truman School Roof at this point in time.
Oh, so we're done with the punch list and everything?
No, we're not. Paperwork has started because depending on the size of the project, School Development Authority has different requirements as to when you can file. So if a larger project, you can file at 30%, 60%, 80%. Smaller projects, they just say you can only file at the end. So it depends on the size of the project and where you are as to when you can file.
So it's possible that that could be closed out before this budget is voted on?
I'm very hopeful that they will be.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a question. Dennis, what happened to the sign?
That was going to be my question.
Is it there?
Barbara,
Is it working?
Barbara,
Mr. Bowker indicated it was.
Is it working?
It-
They
Yeah,
started
because I
to
was
put
here
it-
the other night and it wasn't, but I came in the back today, so I didn't see it.
they
I had someone
installed it
text
in
me
the
today and ask if they were taking it
Fabulous.
down.
Thank you.
no, it's up and running. We haven't gotten training yet. It was just installed this morning, this afternoon.
Okay.
We're in the process of scheduling the training, but it is up and running.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and thank you, Mrs. Kilcummins, for
And what
pursuing
line
that.
item does that go on?
That is under, I believe we took it out of either contracted services or repair services.
There's a 261,420 account.
That helps everyone here, Dennis.
Yeah. In terms of as we go through this process, first of all, this is 100% better than what we sat through the last meeting because I can at least see the numbers on the screen.
You're a lot closer,
So we're
too.
definitely moving in the right direction. I would say as we bring in the schools to give their budget pitches, if we could also move one step beyond the numbers and let's talk about if they're going to be implementing any new programs, if there is a new textbook series that they're rolling out, even if it's not going to make the final cut, let's at least start talking about the nuts and bolts of what's
That
going to
is,
go in.
that is the plan.
Excellent, excellent. But I definitely like this. This is definitely a step in the right direction. Any other comments on the budget? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to the approval of minutes. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular and executive session of November 18th?
So moved.
By Mrs. DePinto, do I have a second?
Second.
By Mr. Walsh. Are there any comments or corrections on the minutes? Hearing none, roll call, Mr. DeAndrea.
Mr. Bowker?
Yes.
Mrs. Bacco?
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto?
Yes.
Mr. McEnroe?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Syak?
Yes. And we move right into the superintendent's report overview. Dr. Labby.
Thank you, Mr. Syak. Okay, if I can direct your attention to Vision 2030 Finance and Infrastructure. Numbers 1 and 2, which can be found on page 2. We have some tuition contracts with districts who are responsible for reimbursing us for educating their students. And on items number 3 and 4, also on page 2, we have tuition contracts with districts who are responsible for reimbursing us for educating, or that we are responsible for reimbursing for educating their students. In both of these cases, these involve children that are part of the Education Stability Act. If we have children that it's determined that their district of residence of their parents is in Sayreville and they're taking into foster care and they're being educated in another district, if their parents reside here, we are responsible for paying the tuition in that school district. The students have the option of remaining in their district of residence, but in many cases, they choose to be educated in a district outside of where their parents live. Conversely, if we have children come into our district that are placed into a foster home and they're educated here, the district in which their parents live, they are responsible for paying us. And that's the case in these tuition contracts. The first two, we are getting reimbursed, and the second two, we are reimbursing. Okay? Number 5 on pages 2 and 3, it's a lease purchasing motion for vehicles and equipment. We're doing that with Middlesex County Ed Services Commission. Item number 10, trips with transportation, particularly the band to Sayreville United, which will be on December 5th. Also, a DECA trip to Kane University, and those can be found on pages 3 and 4. Item number 11, we have tuition and services for students with and without disabilities, and that can be found on pages 4 and 5. For Vision 2030 student achievement under co-curricular, the Wilson Holiday Show is coming up, and that can be found on page 5. Vision 2030 personnel, we have a resignation, item number 1 on page 6. Item number 2 on page 6, and item number 19 on the addendum is the rescinding of some coaching appointments. Item number 3 through 11 on pages 6 and 7 are some leaves of absence. Item number 13 on page 7, we have a certificated staff appointment. Likewise, item number 14 on page 8 is a non-certificated staff appointment. And items 15 and 16 on page 8 are substitute appointments. And finally, item number 17 is a professional day, or several professional day requests, and that can be found on pages 8 and 9. And on the addendum, we have the transfer of an administrator to the Truman Elementary School to fill the principal vacancy. Any questions?
I have a question on the lease. That $685,000 is that where the $35,000 in the lease payment comes from?
Yes,
in the
that's a
budget?
portion of the payment.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Labby. I will move through the sections. I'll ask if there was any committee report. Keep in mind, we did have Thanksgiving in between our last meeting, so it's very possible that many of the board committees have not met since the last meeting. Mr. Balca, Finance and Infrastructure.
No report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on Finance and Infrastructure? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to Student Achievement. Mrs. Bloom?
No report.
Okay, any questions on Student Achievement? We'll move on to Personnel. Mr. Walsh?
The committee did meet shortly, just talked about a few leaves of absences, a couple appointments, and some new staff projected for next year.
Okay. Any questions on Personnel? Okay. Any questions on the Superintendent's report? All right, then at this time, I'll open it up to public. If you wish to speak, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record. If you wish not to be photographed, please let us know. Yeah, this is agenda items only. I don't think so, no. It's agenda items only.
Superintendent's report and the vision stuff comes after.
That's the vote on.
That's the vote on it.
Yeah, it's to vote on it. Yeah, we want to give the public an opportunity to comment before we vote. All right, so no one from public? All right, we will close public then at this time. Can I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So moved.
By Mrs. Bloom, do I have a second? By Mrs. DePinto. Any comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Mr. Balca?
Yes.
Mrs. Bacco?
Yes.
Mrs. Bloom?
Yes.
Mr. Brzezinski?
Yes.
Mrs. DePinto?
Yes.
Mr. McEnroe?
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Sy?
Yes. Under discussion, I would just like to recognize and thank the members of the Saraville Education Association and our teachers and support staff. We had a former student from the class of 2006 who has been suffering from an illness. She just had a child, and there was a fundraiser planned for her to help her out with the medical bills. And the Saraville Education Association, the organization, donated all of the food for that event. And then the teachers and the support staff and our employees, in addition to that contribution, raised $1,700 to go to the family. It's a Saraville family, it's a Saraville graduate, and it's also the daughter of one of our employees. So I want to express thanks on behalf of the board to the Saraville Education Association and our staff for their contributions to that. Are there any other items for discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'll open it up to public on any item concerning the district. Yes, Mrs. Esposito. Oh. Okay, Mr. Bovary, Mrs. Esposito is yielding to you.
John Bovary, 1210 Harbor Club Drive, Harlan. Can you share with us the timeline the board is expecting to make a decision on next year's football program? So the kids that are making decisions to potentially leave, which would be the start of the next semester, February 1st, do we have an idea of timeline? Not your decision, but timeline?
Dr. Labby, I mean, that recommendation would initially come from you.
We're hopeful that that recommendation will be made within the next month to month and a half.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? Mrs. Esposito.
Hello, Lori Esposito, 24 Rhubarb Drive, Parlin, Jersey, former board member. I just wanted to spend a few minutes here this evening in support of Coach Najar. I want to also reach out to the board members and Dr. Labby to let you know that this was a very difficult time for you. I have known Coach Najar for a very long time. I am in total support of him, and I believe most of you are residents that have voted you in. Our board members are in support of him also. I just feel that due to the situations that happened, say in Penn State, that it's a difficult call, because if you're in the locker room, you're being watched. If you're out of the locker room, you're being held accountable now. And I feel that this type of behavior that took place was definitely abnormal. And I don't think we could have predicted that that would happen. And instead of making Coach Najar the scapegoat after he has 20 years of experience, he's brought us to championships. I've had numbers of our football players inbox me personally and just vouch for him. Some of the students wanted to leave school to come in support of him, but their parents wouldn't let them. Not because they don't like Coach Najar, they just didn't want to bring them away from their studies. I really respect all the board members. This is very tough for you, and I'm just reaching out to hope you consider bringing him back, and you would have, you know, most of the support from the whole town. And that's what I feel. I mean, I'm a big believer in him. I've sat with him. I've watched the games. I've listened to students speak to me about Coach Najar, about what a role model he's been, a surrogate dad, and I can't believe for the life of me that he would know that something like this, which is abnormal psychology, would allow this to take place. I don't see him as being like that at all, and I think he would have put a stop to it immediately. And to bring the assistant coaches back without bringing Coach Najar back first, I feel that he should be, I don't know if there's anything in the rule books about that Coach Najar should be in the locker room. I'm thinking we should learn from it at this point, since it's brought up now, the way that these students acted out. And then maybe he could take guidance from the board and from, you know, Superintendent Labby about how you would like him to proceed from this point on, since this is abnormal. And that's all that I'm asking. I think he's a phenomenal man. I've seen the work that he's done with the students. I've been there when the fire engines have come in with the kids all happy from winning. And I don't think he should be a scapegoat for this. Just, that's all that I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Esposito.
Good evening, Louis Santiago, 23 Astor Court, Saraville, New Jersey. I got a couple things to cover. First off, thank God for that sign. I drove out of here this afternoon. It was a very pleasant surprise. And I'm hoping that we can get it up and running and trained and everything, so that's plus side. Me and Ms. Jenkins have met over the last few weeks to discuss some of the items about our nutrition program. We talked about how we're going to try, hopefully before Christmas break, maybe after, to try to get the committee meeting of the students. I'm having the task of trying to get at least 4 or 5, 3 or 4, either one, from each grade so that we can get multiple perspectives. And I'm happy to say, that we're trying to get this ball along. And hopefully, as we mentioned the first time I came here, we will not be bleeding out money on school lunches that people clearly are very stubborn about. Also, I'd like to extend a very warm hand again to come to our government class, and I may have messed up last time. We will bring in coffee and donuts. We do not have coffee and donuts in class ever. That's not cool. But I do warm hand, we're here every morning, first period, from 7:45 to 8:30. So, it would be great to have somebody to come in, tell us about, what your job's about, the decision you have to make, what you do every day. I mean, it is a government class, and, you are our local government and school board government, so I would really, really, really appreciate that. And there's a lot of kids that really, hope for that. And, I mean, I can get Senator Booker here. I'm pretty sure, our local people can also come also. Booker also said that he will be making a comeback soon, hopefully, he said. We're going to have to see a specific date about that. He gave me his number and everything, but he also told us that he wanted to demolish what this media frenzy has done and broken and tarnished this town. He told us that, he goes, I cannot believe what they're saying about you. He goes, you guys are so strong, so polite, so diverse, so everything. He says that he couldn't believe to hear such horrible things about such a great place like Saraville. So with that, I leave you this. Thank you. Good night.
Mr. Santiago, who's the government teacher? Is it still?
Mr. Christopher Howard.
It's still Mr. Howard, okay.
Yes.
And again, if you want to extend that invitation through Mr. Howard, we'll be happy to come in, but board members can't just walk into a classroom uninvited. So, but if it goes through Mr. Howard and Mr. Gentile, we'd be more than happy
Yeah,
to
he
come
said
in.
it's fine. Any date's fine. You can just come in.
He needs
Our
to
doors are-
officially go through.
Yeah, that's got to go through, yeah.
I understand.
Okay.
But, I'll be here every day, trust me. So, other than that, all right, thank you very much.
Thanks. Anyone else for public? Mrs. Kilcummins. Now, what's the next project?
Barbara Kilcummins, 22 Schmidt Street. First of all, I want to thank you. On behalf of the community wants to thank you for putting that sign back up and expending the money. And I was very much interested in the maintenance budget because over the years, this is what has happened, that it has cost the board so much money by letting projects slip through the cracks. We had roofs, which has cost, what, $2 million, the middle school? And my question, is that complete? Is the middle school roof fully complete?
As far as I know, Mr. DeAndrea?
At this point in time, outside of Salover, there is a section of the high school that has not been replaced, I believe, within the last 5 years. Right now, all of our school roofs within the last 5 years have been replaced.
And all the projects are complete that we started?
Yes.
Yes.
Because that's extremely important. You don't have a roof, you don't have a school. You have mold, you have everything else. And you have to bite the bullet, you have to spend the money on the roofs. I was shown pictures of buckets that they had to walk around in the middle school. So I hope this board pays heed to really investing money in maintenance and maintaining what we have. So to me, I was very much interested in this budget. And Slover, I think that has slipped through the cracks. It's been let go. We leased it to South Amboy. We took it back. You have administration, and to keep it a school, you have what? A preschool in there now. And it really does need the money to be, and wasn't repaired all these years. And that's what happened, so. Now, it's costing us a big chunk and a big dollar, which we should have been doing all along. But anyway, thank you for the sign.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Anyone else for public? Okay, we'll close public at this time. Any other board business? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. By Mrs. DePinto, do I have a second? Second. By Mr. Walsh, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried.